The moving of plants is a very wonderful way now to introduce to everyone Alexandra Gelis. One would be tempted to say that she's a Colombian Venezuelan artist based in Toronto, but it's maybe not the good way to introduce her. She has referred to herself as a nomad living and working, while living and working is the same thing for her in many places in Colombia, Venezuela, Canada, and since very recently also in Costa Rica. And I will quote you, sorry, it's a bit weird when you're standing next to me, but it's so nice so that I can't put it in my own words, and it's from this book, Alexandra Gelis' Seeds, very generously distributed online also on the website of Mike Holboom, who's one of the editors of this book. I have had a nomadic life in constant migration from one city to another. I have been a woman traveler with a camera in my hands, sometimes into dangerous lands, capturing and reframing humans and non-humans, usually absent from the media. In my life of constant movement, I was called by the plants and become interested in the relationship of plants and people. In her work, which is very rich and also growing fast, involving film, video and installation mainly, but also photography and digital media, and most importantly, personal work in the field, she is concerned with experiences and stories connected to the ecologies of places and landscapes that have been often violently shaped by colonization. In this context, she has been very much interested in the migration of plants, the often forced displacement from their native environments to other territories, and the exploitation or suppression of the indigenous knowledge about them through colonization. Series of projects that explore the possibilities of using plants as a form of resistance have been conducted in Palenque in Colombia and in Panama. I would like to mention also that she is doing a PhD project in environmental studies at York University with an art-based research project on plant-human relations in equinoctial America, with a case study on Palenque. And since 2008, she has also devoted herself to teaching and educational practice as part of the conSECUENCIAS collective. She will speak about this today, conducting workshops in which the use of cameras and do-it-yourself technology is explored as a means of collaborative creation and self-presentation in local communities. She's exhibited internationally in North and South America, Europe and Ethiopia, has been rewarded a number of prizes and fellowships, most recently by RARE, which is a charitable research center for a process-based project in one of the spaces of Musagetes, is that right? Okay. Based to work with cattail, an indigenous plant in Canada, in relationship with phragmite, which is considered an invasive plant. And I'm very happy she traveled a long way to be here with us today. Hello, Alexandra.
Hello. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for a great introduction. And thanks for this invitation to come here. It's my first time in Germany. So thanks. I'm really fascinated with all the plants, this land, this territory. Well, what I'm going to present today, it is an experiment. It is the first time, I have to confess, that I'm invited to talk about conSECUENCIAS. So I've been working in a collective way for most of my life. But I have never considered the work that I do with collective as my own artwork. So this is completely an experiment. So I was trying to think about the concept of collaborations. So we'll see what happens. So I'm going to center today mostly in my work with collective in South America. And tomorrow I'm going to talk, or I'm going to try to talk about my work with plants. So my presentation is going to have many images. It's like 50 stills. I'm just a media artist, so I need images. I hope it will help you to understand the context. In many ways that I'm working with collective and many ways of cooperations. For the purpose of this talk, I will take you through 3 main places, through San Basilio de Palenque in Colombia, Panama City, and Toronto. My living in these places and facilitating workshop have triggered the formation of collective, many under the umbrella de conSECUENCIAS, and the making of my work as a form of auto-representation, self-expression, self-creation. It is a living project in a form of existence in co-belonging and correlations. I will take you to edited histories of some of my collective, and at the end of each place, I will talk to you about my personal work also, just shortly. I hope you can see how my personal and community work, although they are interconnected, they are different practices within different results. Okay, the community work with collective main purpose. It is to facilitate the productions of individual work working collectively. I understand identities, territories, communities, forms of organization, structures, and cultures as a movement in chaos. Movement and chaos, I'm sorry. A complex entanglement of differences, full of contradictions and full of possibilities. Understanding movement as change and chaos as dislocations. When I talk about dislocations, I mean to crack open the given frames and generate new works and ways of thinking. I'm quoting here Cadagia and Carrasco. I will talk about them later a little. And then with this movement and dislocations, we encounter the unknown within the known to question fixed definitions. My work in collaboration with communities is also in constant transformation, where new possibilities emerge in response to specific situations. It is a work of interconnectedness and cooperations. I belong to collective alliances, organizations, or networks constantly shifting their strategies. My identity, it is always in the making, in the becoming. I'm gonna start with a little bit about me. I was born in Venezuela. I grew up in Colombia with a Cuban mother, a mixed family. Catalan, Hindu, Afro-Colombian, and indigenous roots. I'm a Spanish-speaking Caribbean. There are many Caribbeans. I live in Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, and Puerto Rico, and ended up now in Canada. Somehow in Toronto, I became Latin American and built my community around the struggles of women, queer, transsexual, immigrants, and many others underprivileged and discriminated communities. So movement and dislocation also apply to my practice as an artist and different ways of research. The rigor that I follow in my research, life, and artistic work is conditioned by the different patterns, rhythms, and forms of organizations in the communities where I work. Always is based on care and long-term relationships. My artistic practice is interdisciplinary. I work with digital video, as you already mentioned, 60 and Super 8mm film, photography, drawing, sound, and interactive work. And I'm very interested in the politics of DIY technologies and its applications. I have also a large body of work that is plant-based, that I will talk a little bit later. But sometimes I found myself embroidering with human hair, creating ceramics, or making papers as many techniques that I have learned in communities. For example, these images are from a workshop that I facilitate with my mother during her cancer treatment in the hospital in Panama. So we learn how to make wigs while we teach them how to make dolls that will be with you during the cancer treatment of chemotherapy. So my mom, I have to mention, it was one of my main collaborators. And my family, I'm coming from a family of artists, sculptors. So I cannot separate my personal life from my artistic practice. I can say my practice is my form of existence. That's why I live in so many places. So you ask me, so you have 3 different kids? I say, well, more than that, I have a lot of love for different places or territories, as Ursula says before. Now let's talk about collective. In my experience, the formation of collective, it is a response to work with underprivileged and discriminated people and communities that suffer inequality. For me, a collective, it is a survival tool in which many minds work in different ways to create possibilities for resistance and invent freedoms as individuals in a group level. It is about morphing emancipatory forms of working together and collectively care for ecological and social commons. I'm interested in collective as a place of negotiation of contents, of constant differences. Each collective demands its own co-belonging strategies and modes of organization according to the territory. It is different to work with people in Palenque than with sexual workers in Toronto, even though they share the same need for emancipation. The word conSECUENCIAS, it has a dual meaning. The result of something or implications, and also with sequences referring to moving images in storytelling or stories. Usually the work within the communities began with workshops on video, photography, or DIY technologies. But each place creates their own definitions of conSECUENCIAS. Let me take you through some of the definitions. I'm going to start with Palenque de San Basilio. It's in the north of Colombia, a place that takes me back to my childhood. San Basilio de Palenque, it is a small town 40 minutes from the city of Cartagena, Palenque. Palenque was one of the world communities called Palenques, which were founded by escaped and slaves in the 7th century. Palenque is known as the first free town of the Americas. The cultural space of Palenque de San Basilio embodies different African roots in their specific social, medical, and religious practices, as well as musical and oral traditions. For a little bit of context, in the 80s, my mother and a group of friends worked in Palenque on the recovery of the collective memory, language, and traditions using local methodologies. A reconstruction of multiple symbolic spaces of Palenque, as my mom used to describe. The work ended up with two important points. The first one was the ethno-education law in Colombia in 1985, which recognized the particular needs of each of the communities. Not even Canada has this law nowadays. Second was the declaration by UNESCO of Palenque as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity in 2005. I cannot grow up in Palenque, visiting my aunties, Clara Inés Guerrero, historian, and Chadorina Hernandez, a feminist activist leader in the community who is now the first Palenquero to reach the country of the Republic of Colombia with the new elected government. I have to mention that right now in Colombia we have a lot of hope. There is even a new, a new vice president, which is an Afro-Colombian community, Afro-Colombian activist, I'm sorry. It is important to remember that Colombia, it is the place where more environmental activists have been killed in the last years. So we have a lot of hope. Let me go back in time. In 2009, Chadorina approached me to teach a workshop. After many days of discussion, what is planned to be a video workshop became a collective to create a community radio to disseminate local information and record oral traditions in Spanish and Palenquero. That marked the beginning of conSECUENCIAS, Palenque. We record knowledge keepers, soundscapes, music, and drums from different radio programs. We also spend a lot of time working with youth and elders, working with medicinal plants and their stories to make a medicinal plant radio show. Sometimes we'll film with cell phones, sometimes with camera, or sometimes with the tablets the Sun organization donated to the town. Important to say, all this work, I have been doing it just with my own money. We just got a little bit of funding at some point to buy two mixers for the radio. So we made a lot of DIY devices, like the one that we have here, that is ambisonic microphone. So Palenque is sound, is drum, so we record. We have an incredible archive of recordings. The radio was on internet. There is a military airport nearby, so we couldn't arrange to use the AM radio because it was forbidden. So we have to do everything online. So here we invite another collective to help us. To have the radio on internet, so we have even coding classes in the process. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna show you 1 minute of how the radio looks like. It's in Spanish, en Palenquero.
Ese es el canto de ellos de la nueva generación. Y cuando nosotros cantamos, el olor y la lora estaba loreando, el olor y la lora estaba
Construyamos juntos la nueva Aloito Pío, emisora comunitaria de San Basilio de Palenque en Internet, un espacio de comunicación con los palenqueros que están en el mundo.
Familia así, con vileza así. A lo que te andi Barranquilla, andi Venezuela, andi Cartagena, andi Santa Marta, andi Bogotá, andi Cali. Ane baten, programa, andi gente por le chitea, un bozo.
Aloito Pío, tu emisora en Internet.
Mini, y mini a escucharlo.
La propia guitarrita. Uy, qué nota.
So that is a class with Cassiani. He is teaching to the kids about the traditional funeral songs that they sing the last day of the Lumbalu, and they normally play those games during the whole life. So the traditional songs changes, so he's teaching them how were they in the old times. Sadly, Maestro Cassiani passed 1 month ago. So without knowing it, we were laying down the foundation of an important archive in Palenque. Okay, all of this to trigger different creation of a personal work. After the radio ended, I kept researching and recording medicinal plants. Well, the radio didn't end it transformed in a different kind of collective communication, or communication collective. One of the key questions of my PhD it has the question of how medicinal, edible, and ritual plants moved from Africa to these territories were fundamental in the formation of San Basilio de Palenque as a free territory. Investigation that centers in plants' particular relationship with placemaking, their forms of subjectivity and sociality, as well as their temporality, which can at the same time create a sense of permanence at individual and collective scale, but also changing the landscape. So then we go, then the personal meets with the community. No? In 2010, I approached Alejandro, a map making concerned with the new generation's lack of interest in the craft and also in the medicinal plant knowledge. I asked him to make one using medicinal plant. Alejandro lived in the high parts of Palenque with a community of people displaced by paramilitares from La Bonga, town that is a few hours by horse from Palenque. The process of making the mat became a meeting space to talk about plants and their medicinal properties. The meetings became trips into the woods looking for new plants, and the walks became spontaneous lectures about the territory and stories of people traveling to time and space helped by the magical force of the matimba tree and many other ones. Knowledge became tangible by spending time together and sharing. Now the community has many hours of stories, conversations with abuelos, the grandparents, traditional healers, midwives, artisans, and knowledge keepers. So we made together, this is an interactive online platform that you can see under migratedplants.org, that it has some of the stories. The ones that they consider that can go online to the general public. Many other ones are still in an archive. I also create Super 8mm films, I create video installations, and a series of sound installations with medicinal mat as sculptural objects. I also have different kind of interactive work that deals with the modernity arriving to the town, as in the case of Pajareque, which is a lumbalu, a funeral ritual to the losing of house and traditions. So I have so many stories on Palenque, but we have so little time. So for the lack of time, I'm gonna cut it here. And I'm just gonna mention that with Dorina, right now we are working on an archive for the last 13 years, but also all the place that will gather all the archive that many historians and anthropologists create, but it never stayed in town with the objection that you don't have a real archive. So this is the first one. Then we want to create a patio medicinal, a medicinal garden in a chemistry laboratory, working with elders, medicinal healers, and youth. This garden will strengthen traditional medicinal practices and at the same time be an economical source by producing and selling medicinal tinctures and plants. The collective will organize drumming, dancing, and storytelling in Palenquero language to trigger the youth participation in creating this garden. We are interested in storytelling and music as a community healing and carried away by the call of the drum. So now I'm gonna move you into a complete different place, which is Panama City. My family was forced to move into Panama City. Some of the images that you're gonna see here are coming from this book, if you wanna take a look of the book. And the Panama or conSECUENCIAS start in 2009 with a series of workshops with youth that I was invited to teach in the Casco Antiguo of Panama, which is the colonial old neighborhood, under the framework of the Art for the Earth Festival. However, in my interaction with the participant, I noted that they were not interested in the water, even though that they were in the middle of the Panama Canal, which is just water. They were more interested to talk about their personal experience living in dangerous neighborhoods with a high incidence of violence created by the leftovers of misery and weapons left by the US Army after the invasion of 1989. So conSECUENCIAS Panama became a response to two important things. One, the extreme violence affecting youth, but also the gentrification process created by the 1997 UNESCO Declaration of Panama City as a UNESCO Cultural World Heritage Site, causing the displacement of cultural rich community for neighborhoods that were renovated or simply turned into restaurants to rich tourists. So we've been working together for more than 13 years. The collective is always changing. It was directed by my mother, who just passed last year, so we are in the moment now of trying to figure it out, or restructuring how it's gonna look. But we have produced over 60 short videos by individual participants of the collective, 1 book, 2 music festival, photography, exhibitions and galleries, and many screenings in marginalized neighborhoods and theaters and local TV. But more importantly, we have an incredible archive that gathers the story of this neighborhood, of the people, of their traditions, which is completely out of the gaze of the media in Panama. So we are trying to now get money to make a long documentary. So now we are working with a lawyer, because we need a lawyer. It's a difficult place. But also we are trying to create a garden of mangroves. Yes, I guess I don't have more time, so I will cut there, and then I'm gonna talk about my work tomorrow. Thank you.